"You may think my departure strange and foolish," said the young man. "You do not know how a paragraph in a newspaper may exasperate one. Read that," said he, "when I am gone, that you may not be witness of my anger." While the Count picked up the paper, he put spurs to his horse, which leapt in astonishment at such an unusual stimulus, and shot away with the rapidity of an arrow. The Count watched him with a feeling of compassion, and when he had completely disappeared, read as follows. The French officer in the service of Ali Pasha of Yanina alluded to 3 weeks since in the Impartial, who not only surrendered the castle of Yanina, but sold his benefactor to the Turks, styled himself truly at that time Fernan, as our esteemed contemporary states, but he has since added to his Christian name a title of nobility and a family name. He now calls himself the Count of Mercer, and ranks among the peers. Thus the terrible secret, which Beauchamp had so generously destroyed, appeared again like an armed phantom, and another paper, deriving its information from some malicious source, had published 2 days after Albert's departure for Normandy the few lines which had rendered the unfortunate young man almost crazy. Chapter 86. The Trial. At 8 o'clock in the morning Albert had arrived at Beauchamp's door. The valet de chambre had received orders to usher him in at once. Beauchamp was in his bath. "Here I am," said Albert. "Well, my poor friend," replied Beauchamp, "I expected you." "I need not say I think you are too faithful and too kind to have spoken of that painful circumstance." "Your having sent for me is another proof of your affection. So, without losing time, tell me, have you the slightest idea whence this terrible blow proceeds?" "I think I have some clue. But first tell me all the particulars of this shameful plot." Beauchamp proceeded to relate to the young man, who was overwhelmed with shame and grief, the following facts. Two days previously, the article had appeared in another paper besides the Impartial, and, what was more serious, one that was well known as a government paper. Beauchamp was breakfasting when he read the paragraph. He sent immediately for a cabriolet, and hastened to the publisher's office. Although professing diametrically opposite principles from those of the editor of the other paper, Beauchamp, as it sometimes, we may say often, happens, was his intimate friend, The editor was reading, with apparent delight, a leading article in the same paper on beet sugar, probably a composition of his own. "Ah, pardieu," said Beecham, "with the paper in your hand, my friend, I need not tell you the cause of my visit." "Are you interested in the sugar question?" asked the editor of the ministerial paper. "No," replied Beecham, "I have not considered the question. A totally different subject interests me." "What is it?" "The article relative to Mercer." "Indeed? Is it not a curious affair?" "So curious, that I think you are running a great risk of a prosecution for defamation of character." "Not at all. We have received with the information all the requisite proofs, and we are quite sure M. de Mercer will not raise his voice against us. Besides, it is rendering a service to one's country to denounce these wretched criminals who are unworthy of the honor bestowed on them." Beecham was thunderstruck. "Who, then, has so correctly informed you?" asked he, "for my paper, which gave the first information on the subject, has been obliged to stop for want of proof, and yet we are more interested than you in exposing M. de Mercer, as he is a peer of France, and we are of the opposition." "Oh, that is very simple. We have not sought to scandalize. This news was brought to us. A man arrived yesterday from Yanina, bringing a formidable array of documents, and when we hesitated to publish the accusatory article, he told us it should be inserted in some other paper." Beecham understood that nothing remained but to submit, and left the office to dispatch a courier to Mercer. But he had been unable to send to Albert the following particulars, as the events had transpired after the messenger's departure, namely, that the same day a great agitation was manifest in the House of Peers among the usually calm members of that dignified assembly. Every one had arrived almost before the usual hour, and was conversing on the melancholy event which was to attract the attention of the public towards one of their most illustrious colleagues. Some were perusing the article, others making comments and recalling circumstances which substantiated the charges still more. The Count of Mercer was no favorite with his colleagues. Like all upstarts, he had had recourse to a great deal of haughtiness to maintain his position. The true nobility laughed at him, the talented repelled him, and the honorable instinctively despised him. He was, in fact, in the unhappy position of the victim marked for sacrifice. The finger of God once pointed at him, every one was prepared to raise the hue and cry. The Count of Mercer alone was ignorant of the news. He did not take in the paper containing the defamatory article, and had passed the morning in writing letters and in trying a horse. He arrived at his usual hour. With a proud look and insolent demeanor, he alighted, passed through the corridors, and entered the house without observing the hesitation of the doorkeepers or the coolness of his colleagues. Business had already been going on for half an hour when he entered. Every one held the accusing paper, but, as usual, no one liked to take upon himself the responsibility of the attack. At length an honorable peer, Mercer's acknowledged enemy, ascended the tribune with that solemnity which announced that the expected moment had arrived. There was an impressive silence. Mercer alone knew not why such profound attention was given to an orator who was not always listened to with so much complacency. The Count did not notice the introduction, in which the speaker announced that his communication would be of that vital importance that it demanded the undivided attention of the House. But at the mention of Janina and Colonel Fernand, he turned so frightfully pale that every member shuddered and fixed his eyes upon him. Moral wounds have this peculiarity: they may be hidden, but they never close, always painful, always ready to bleed when touched, they remain fresh and open in the heart. The article having been read during the painful hush that followed, a universal shudder pervaded the assembly, and immediately the closest attention was given to the orator as he resumed his remarks. He stated his scruples and the difficulties of the case. It was the honor of M. de Mercer, and that of the whole House, he proposed to defend, by provoking a debate on personal questions, which are always such painful themes of discussion. He concluded by calling for an investigation, which might dispose of the calumnious report before it had time to spread, and restore M. de Mercer to the position he had long held in public opinion. Mercer was so completely overwhelmed by this great and unexpected calamity that he could scarcely stammer a few words as he looked around on the assembly. This timidity, which might proceed from the astonishment of innocence as well as the shame of guilt, conciliated some in his favor, for men who are truly generous are always ready to compassionate when the misfortune of their enemies surpasses the limits of their hatred. The President put it to the vote, and it was decided that the investigation should take place. The Count was asked what time he required to prepare his defense. Mercer's courage had revived when he found himself alive after this horrible blow. "My lords," answered he, "it is not by time I could repel the attack made on me by enemies unknown to me, and, doubtless, hidden in obscurity, it is immediately, and by a thunderbolt, that I must repel the flash of lightning which, for a moment, startled me. Oh, that I could, instead of taking up this defense, shed my last drop of blood to prove to my noble colleagues that I am their equal in worth."